Hey there, dream chasers, career shifters, and seasoned professionals ready for their second act. Welcome to More Than a Lawyer, the podcast that's breaking boundaries and redefining success one inspiring story at a time. I'm London, and just like the title says, I'm more than a lawyer, navigating the dynamic landscape of modern careers, juggling passions, and pursuing our wildest dreams. So, whether you're a millennial on the brink of a career pivot, a Gen Zer eager to explore diverse paths, or even a seasoned professional ready to try something new, this podcast is your roadmap to success. Join us as we dive deep into conversations with trailblazers who are doing more than just clocking in. They're crafting their own narrative, embracing multiple roles, and thriving in the pursuit of their passions. So buckle up because each episode is a journey filled with insights, wisdom, and a whole lot of inspiration. Let's rewrite the rules of success together. Welcome to the revolution and welcome to More Than a Lawyer. We are so excited for today's guest. So she's not only my dear friend, Iman Farrior, but she is also a loving wife, a mom of 4, which is like no small feat. She's a business affairs exec at none other than the infamous CAA. And more importantly, she's a real estate powerhouse. So hopefully we're going to get some tips from her on how to work that magic. But yeah, let's welcome her to the studio. Iman.
Yay, thank you. I love this. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. It was just like a few weeks ago that we were at lunch and I was like, okay, we need you on this podcast because you are dropping jewels and I feel like the audience needs to hear it too. Like it's just not fair that I'm gaining all of this wisdom without them. So I just wanted to start off at like, being both a lawyer, business affairs exec, and working in real estate. Like what led you to this path? Like how did you get started in real estate?
So, I'm originally I was born in New York, but raised in Houston, and I'm an only child. So I don't know if there are any only children out there, but it can be a little boring. It can be a little boring sometimes. So
Yes.
I was an avid reader. And what got me into real estate was starting to read these like kind of corny real estate books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read about all these like mega investors, all over the world who started off very small and built, real, empires. So that was sort of my first inclination.
I love
So
this.
after I became a lawyer, I, following the money, went into corporate securities, M&A.
Okay.
Our salaries coming out of law school were like, they had jumped 2 or 3 times while I was in law school. So coming out, I was like, I have to take a corporate job just, on the surface here. So,
Yeah.
but when I got there, I was working within the energy sector and, everyone around me was just gun-ho about what they were doing every day. And I was just like, I don't get it. This is not exciting at all. We're pouring through hundreds of pages of like securities offerings and I'm like, there's got to be something more. I was working a lot at that time, but when I left my first firm and went to an oil company, I went from working, 70, 80-hour weeks to 40, 45, 50 max. So I had all of this spare time. And so that's when I kind of had time to think and like reflect on what I wanted to do. And I was like, I think I'm going to get my real estate license. So I literally would go to work and then by evening I would study for this real estate exam and do all the courses. Took me a few months. I would stop and go. It wasn't like a straight path. But once I got it, it was like the most obvious thing I could have done. And I ended up having some of my lawyer friends ask me to help them buy their real estate, sometimes their first home to live in or like their first rental properties.
I love this.
And so that's sort of how I got started. And before long, it had kind of bloomed into a little real estate boutique. I got married. I convinced my husband that I knew what I was doing, which I'm not entirely sure was always the case. But he trusted me enough with, a modest amount of money to like say, hey, we're going to start investing as a married couple. But we kind of started with that. And we just started to slowly but surely acquire modest but still sizable residential properties, one commercial property. which I don't know if I would.
Commercial,
Yeah, I
love
know.
this.
I know. I was really getting ahead of myself on that one.
Wow.
We can talk about that later as well.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of single family though. A lot of people
Right.
when they first go into real estate will invest in like a multifamily, which is probably a more stable, secure
Yeah.
path. But for some reason, I just thought, for one, I don't want to manage like 10 tenants, or I wanted just one or one family.
Right.
And so we stayed on the single family path for many years before we went into the commercial side. And I still stand by that. I think, especially in states like California where there's a lot more regulation around housing, with single family, as an investor, there's a lot more freedom.
Oh,
No rent control usually. No dictating how long you can rent your property. So I like that freedom. But of course, people have made excessive money on the multifamily side. So it's definitely an analysis.
Right. And I mean, I can imagine, just in the pandemic when there were all those laws like protecting tenants from their landlords. I'm just like, oh my gosh, how to navigate that when you're dealing with like multi-tenants and, mini units, things like that. I'm just like, oh, dealing with one family, I feel like it's more manageable.
Exactly. And like people tend to forget that, landlord, the word has a negative connotation. But, and of course, there are big, bad institutional landlords out there who do not do right by their tenants. But there's also a lot of families out there acting as landlords who are investing in real estate. So when, for instance, with the pandemic, when there was a moratorium on rent, I mean, these are people who have mortgages to pay potentially on these rental properties. And now the government has essentially said the tenant doesn't have to pay, and you don't know how long. So you're now absorbing a cost that you were not expecting to absorb. And it can be, painful, detrimental. It can send people into bankruptcy. So it's, I get the angst and frustration around rising costs, and people feel like landlords are being greedy, and sometimes they are.
Yeah.
But in many cases, they're raising rents to keep up with valuations of properties that are causing taxes to go up, expenses to repair going up. So there's just a lot, baked into that that is not always just a landlord that's being the big bad wolf.
Right. Oh my gosh. It seems like you've learned a ton because as you're talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, can you be my consultant?
Anytime. Anytime.
I'm like, score. But can you share any insights or strategies you've learned from your experience in real estate? Because it seems like, venturing off to commercial, I didn't even know that about you. So I'm like, that's impressive. But how was it just, what's some nuggets you learned just doing the single family homes and investing in those?
Right. So, with all real estate, location is everything. I'm sure everyone's heard the location.
Yeah.
And there's just so many nuances to selecting properties that a lot of people don't think about.
Right.
One big one that I see, especially in LA, is traffic patterns. So when you're going to an open house on a Sunday afternoon when no one's trying to get to work, it might be the perfect property.
Exactly.
But on Mondays at 8 a.m., it's an entirely different dynamic. So it's really about sort of enveloping yourself in the diligence process.
Okay.
I think sometimes people get caught up in being in a certain neighborhoods or a certain size of house or a certain look. Yeah. But there are just so many external factors that can really dictate how enjoyable it's going to be to live in that property, how easy it will be for you to sell the property.
Right.
So when I have my eye on a property, I do a lot of diligence remotely, like from my desk. I'm pulling reports, all the reports I have access to as a broker to sort of get a top level analysis. But then I spend several weeks driving by the property at different times of day, different days of the week to get a sense of what the flow is. Nice. Sitting outside the property with my windows down, do I hear barking dogs everywhere? I mean, it sounds like something minor, but I have friends who have purchased homes next to barking dogs, and it really can become a nuisance.
Yeah.
Living next to a school can be great, but it can also be a nuisance. You have to understand, is the carpool line going to literally back up down your street where you can't even back out every morning?
That's a good point.
People don't think about those types of things.
I was just at an open house on Sunday, and funny enough, it's on the same block as a school, and they're like, oh, when you have kids, they can walk. And I'm just thinking ooh, it's like, yeah, that's convenient, but what if I don't want to go to that school? And then it's like,
and then you're dealing with that.
Yes,
exactly.
That's a good point.
But I look at things like, of course, neighborhood matters. You can see how values are appreciating or not in a neighborhood. So that's important. How easy is it to resell? So you can check, time on market of properties in the area. So if it's taking properties 7, 8, 9 or more months to sell, not a good sign. There's a reason, like the market's not interested in that neighborhood or on a more slow basis.
That makes sense.
I tend to try to buy in neighborhoods that have good schools.
That's smart.
Now, on the flip side of that makes them more expensive to buy into. So, but even if you're buying in a area that doesn't have great schools, you have to think about, well, okay, if someone buys here and they don't want to send their kid to the local school, are there private options or parochial options in the area? Or can they get good highway access to get their kid to school if they aren't going to send them to local schools? But I tend to find that neighborhoods with good schools, the properties hold their value and appreciate at a better rate, which as an investor is mostly what I'm focused on.
Right.
And I think about would my family want to live here,
Right.
If you wouldn't want to live there, it's going to be hard to find someone who does.
Yes.
Even if it's a lot cheaper and it's like a better, deal for you, you might be better off paying slightly more with something that's more marketable.
That makes sense. And so you mentioned, because you've owned properties in Texas and California, like you said, Miami. So would you suggest owning property outside of the state that you live in, or you think it's a harder task?
I think it's definitely a great option.
Okay.
Especially if you're on the coast where real estate, the entry point is just so high to get in. I mean, it's almost unrealistic. Most people are struggling to buy their own first home.
Yeah.
But there are Midwest options. The key is having someone, whether it's a realtor or someone versed in real estate investment on the ground to keep an eye on the property, to kind of give you updates and rundowns on what's happening. Because there's a lot of local politics and legislation that can affect properties. So you don't want to be so far removed from that that you have no clue. Because for us, we monitor that, and when certain things pass, we're like, it's time to unload.
Yeah.
Or it's time to buy in this area. So that can dictate how active or inactive we are.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great option. I mean, there are Midwest cities that are doing very well right now. And there's, as you've read, I'm sure it's a single family shortage. We can't build at a fast enough rate to meet the demand. Yeah. So I think doing your research again is like really important. Is what are the economic indicators in that geographic? And then if it looks good, go for it. But start small. It can be a small townhouse. Like my first property outside of my first property was my condo. I bought right before I even had my real first job. This was back, as you know, in 2008 when you could take your offer letter from the law firm and show it to a bank. And they were like, sure, you'll have a job in 6 months at that rate. We'll give you a mortgage. And that's how I got my first property.
Oh my God.
Not saying that was wise on their part. Fortunately, I never defaulted and always paid my mortgage on time. Wow. But a lot of my colleagues at different law firms lost their jobs when that market crashed. I didn't, but imagine if I had, it would have been a much different situation. So, after I bought that condo, my first property my husband and I bought was a townhouse.
Oh, nice.
It wasn't very expensive. It was very modest. But we had very good rents off of that townhouse for many years. Ooh. For many years. I mean, it never was vacant more than 4 weeks.
And this is pre-Airbnb.
Yeah, I mean, this is like before. I mean, Airbnb was definitely alive and well then, but I was targeting people who wanted year or more leases.
Oh, gotcha.
But between, my long-term tenants, I would use Airbnb often to do short terms. I've had some nightmare experiences with that. I got paid, but like, it's what are those folks going to do to your property in between? Because they're there for a short period of time. So they're kind of treating it like a hotel. Like, we can tear this mess up and move on with our lives, which oftentimes does happen.
Good time, not a long
so,
time.
That's a whole separate conversation about dealing with Airbnb and Verbo tenants. But so we went from that townhouse to then a more traditional single family. Nice. And again, like, we were in an area that was really walkable. It had a lot of great restaurants and retail synergy, and people wanted to be there. And so again, very rare that we ever had much vacancy.
Nice. So did you actually like live in those places before you rented them out?
So the townhouse, no, but the first single family, when we moved out of that house, we made it a rental. And that's been a pattern of ours. We buy a house, we move out, we keep it.
I love that.
And so, because at that time, I know things are different now, but rates were so low that you were getting this money for free, essentially. I mean, it's free compared to what it is now, and definitely free compared to the 50s and 60s when people were paying interest in the teens.
Right.
So we're obviously now in a much different debt climate. Debt is far more expensive, and you're seeing a lot of investors especially struggle with the debt service obligation. Yeah. But that's why it's so important to strike while it's hot. And I told so many people, buy now, because these rates, it's not going to be like this forever.
I know, 2% in 2021. I was like, babe, we just have to buy it. I don't care where it's at.
It doesn't matter. I mean, at that point, it doesn't matter, because if you find something better, you just rent it. You're like, you're making real money.
Seriously. Oh my gosh. We had to buy in Florida because we were just like, we kept getting outbid in LA. So we are like, you know what? Let's just buy something.
Yes. Buy something just to lock it up, because it truly can be a windfall, as we've seen.
Oh my gosh. And then, so fun fact, Iman and I had a lunch a few weeks ago, and you were mentioning something, how to avoid capital gains. And like, you've purchased many properties, but you've learned some tidbits along the way. So what's the trick to it? I don't know.
Right. So as you've heard on the news, our tax code can be leveraged in many ways. And unfortunately, the people leveraging it the best are wealthier folks who have, great consultants, CPAs, tax professionals in their lives. Yeah. So essentially what happens is, say you buy a property for $200,000 and you hold it for a few years. Yeah. And it's now worth $700,000, right? So that's a $500,000 gain. Yes. If you live in a state like California, you're paying state income gain tax on that and federal capital gain tax on that. Gosh. So that can be a big whop. So to defer that, and I wouldn't say you avoid it, but you defer it. You can push it off. Okay. By basically, the rule is essentially, and I'm definitely kind of putting this down a funnel, but the rule is, if you buy a property that is $1 more than what you sell that prior property for, you don't pay the gains. So in our example, we bought the house for $200. We sold it for $700, let's say. We've got a $500 gain. Yeah. If we go buy a house for $700,000 and one, or if you bought a house for $1 million, and it just has to be over that sale price, you're not going to pay any taxes on that $500,000. Oh my gosh! So say it went from $200 and you held it for 20 years, and now it's $4 million. Yeah. Same thing applies. Oh, you just have to spend $1 more, so you're saving yourself the out-of-pocket expense of paying those taxes. Now, of course, consult your tax professional, but the way the rules are now is, if you 1031 your way through multiple properties until you die, your heirs get the benefit of that as well. Oh. So from a wealth building standpoint, it's...
Oh my gosh, this is the way to level the playing field, guys.
It's a great way for people who don't have a lot of cash access to be wealthy.
Exactly.
In property. By being smart.
This is how you build the generational wealth.
Yes.
I feel like our audience is going to figure out how to reach out to you, because they're going to want to know all the tidbits. Clearly, you are an expert. So with your expertise in both real estate and legal, how do you identify and assess potential opportunities and decide, this is when I'm going to focus in my real estate expertise. This is when I'm going to focus on my day-to-day. It's like, how do you balance both industries and both interests? Because you're very talented in both. So
thank you. Well, it's interesting. Like, as a mom of four, things have changed over the years. Like when I first started doing this, I didn't have kids. Right. Then I had twins, and then I had another kid, then another kid. So my bandwidth to manage people, because that's what you're doing when you're managing properties, you're managing the people that live in there, which we all know can be challenging. Yeah. My patience and tolerance and time for that would ebb and flow. Right. And so there would be times when I would be at my wit's end with tenants, and I would just tell my husband, I think we just need to sell this, because I just can't. I can't right now. And then I'll get in a spirit of, I want to buy something. I want to deal with people again. So, nowadays there are so many ways to invest without being a direct owner.
Right. Okay.
So there's now what we call like real estate crowdfunding platforms, where dozens or hundreds of people can invest in one property and share the sort of financial burden of that, but also like the
Yes.
managerial burden of it.
Mhm.
I always had the option, as any landlord would, to hire a management company to manage the properties.
That's
I've
great.
never done that. Some would say I'm a fool. I may also call myself a fool because I was,
What?
taking on all of that day to day. Oh, the
Yourself?
toilet broke, and oh, I can't do this, and
Oh no.
so you can sort of outsource that. I'm a little cheap. With a management company, they want a percentage of your rent every month.
Oh gosh.
To me, it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
Especially if you're buying properties that are, for the most part, sound.
Yeah.
Now, if you buy something that's a little bit of a lift as far as maintenance, it may make more sense to have a management company do it. But we tried to buy things that we thought were sturdy and not going to be a major problem as far as maintenance was concerned.
Oh, that makes
But
sense.
I think that's always an option. It's always an option to, invest as a group or use a platform.
Oh, I love that.
There's also the more institutional path, which is investing in like real estate investment trusts, which we do a lot more of now. So those are basically big funds that they might own 100 multifamilies and like 50 single families.
Right.
And they're managing the buying and selling of those, the renting of those. So you're completely a passive investor who makes your capital investment, lets them handle all the day-to-day and like long-term strategy, and then they just send you checks.
We love that.
Yes, checks, mailbox money, which is always great.
Yes.
So there's different levels to it. I think it's being real and really thinking about like what type of desire and time do I have to deal with this?
Right.
And kind of picking a tool within that sort of mindset of, do I have a lot of time, a little time? Do I want to make big investments, small investments? Do I want to make investments by myself? Do I want to be with a group?
That's
You and I have talked about, investment clubs.
Yes.
Wanting to bring those back. So if you don't want to be in just a massive group dealing with a REIT,
Right.
you could form or join a real estate investment club where that's reputable, that is in your financial plan, is comfortable to you.
Right.
But I think the key is just be in it somehow.
Yeah.
Like it is truly an oversight for anyone with disposable income. And again, with disposable income, to not be invested in real estate somewhere in the world.
Right. It does seem like a waste, especially because you're being taxed on that disposable income. So you better make it work for you.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
you need to make it work for you. You can't just be a W-2 and just expect to feel like you're ever making any progress.
Right.
You got to be figuring out how to make returns. And the returns in real estate, of course, things can go bad, but if you're looking at your, standard S&P 500 8%, we've seen gains in the 20s, 20, 21%. Not all of them are that way. Some are 8, which you're thinking, oh, was it even worth my time? Maybe not. But if you're getting 15, 16, 17, 20% returns, hard to turn that down.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So what do you hope to gain, both personally and professionally with what I call your side hustle? Because I mean, it's really like 2 full-time jobs, but like, this is, not your 9 to 5, but it's something that you spend a lot of time doing your research and your work ethic in. And so what do you hope to gain from this?
It's interesting. It's funny. I was just talking to a friend back in Houston who he sent me a property and it was like $290,000. And it just made me like, a piece of me just felt like, oh my gosh, I forgot that elsewhere you can buy a home. And this house was maybe a mile or 2 from downtown Houston.
Wow.
That you can still buy a home at that price point.
Oh my gosh.
So it does make me want to start reconsidering investing outside of the state. I mean, as much as I love California and we're never leaving,
right.
It's almost impossible.
It's so hard. I'm just like,
it's hard to live here, much less to be investing here. And I was even last night, I'm a Redfin guru between Redfin and Zillow. My kids make fun of me. They're like, they like to see my time on, my time usage on my iPhone. And I'm like, yeah, but mommy's looking at real estate. Right. I'm looking at Redfin and Zillow.
Right. This is productive.
Yeah. But, I was looking up and down the coast from the top of the state border all the way down. And I'm like, I cannot believe how expensive it is to live here.
So expensive.
So, to answer your question, I'm sort of in a transition. We're building a house for ourselves, our family now, which is a undertaking. We love our builder, so it's been very smooth so far. But I think once that's complete, I would like to build my to build a investment property from the ground up, or you either do a deep renovation. If it's in California, it'll probably be a deep renovation.
Right.
But, I'm looking at parts of the country where lots are so accessible at a very reasonable price point. I'm like, why don't we just buy a few lots, build 6 homes?
Yes. A boutique hotel.
For the price it would cost to buy a whole house here in LA.
That is, oh my gosh.
So
we need that.
I'm sort of on the early side of this thought. And my husband's like, you got so many thoughts. I'm like, yeah. He's like, your thoughts are expensive. I'm like, yeah. But they make money. They have great returns.
Exactly. You've proven yourself.
Exactly. I'm like, they are expensive thoughts, but they at least pay off in the long run.
Right.
But yeah, we're thinking about that. There are parts even of LA that I think are hidden gems.
Mm-hmm.
I'll talk about that offline. You guys
Yes.
call me.
Exactly.
But there are parts of LA that are hidden gems that I would love to get in.
Right.
And by getting in, it could be buying something that's a tear down and holding it and waiting for somebody who wants to come swoop it up and build on it. But the name of the game with real estate is to get in.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have money to do something with the property or it's not in the condition you really want, just get in, because every time we blink, the price is going up.
They are.
I mean, literally.
Yeah. I've heard a rumor that, I don't know if this is true, so don't take my word, but they said like the elections may have the interest rates, like may affect the interest rates. They may go up or down. So just be on the lookout for that.
Yeah,
I mean,
presidential elections always swing the pendulum one way or the other. This one, I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
I think this notion that, the rates are going to come down. I don't know. I mean, maybe, but maybe not,
Right.
And are you going to kick yourself for not getting in? And my thing is, even though the rates aren't where we would all like to see them, if they do go down and you bought at a higher rate now, you can always refinance it.
That's true.
If they go up, you never got in.
Right.
It's better to be in at a higher rate than you would like than to not be in at all.
Yeah. My takeaway is to get in.
I say get in.
And you mentioned that you guys, ventured off into commercial real estate.
Yes.
Just whatever you're comfortable sharing about that adventure, and would you ever do it again?
So, yeah, I ventured into commercial. I think this might have been our 3rd investment property we bought. And it was a very small commercial building. It was probably 3,500 square feet, 1-story building, very old, built in the 30s.
Ooh.
The people who owned it before me were ironically lawyers. They were like PI lawyers, and they sold it. It wasn't in great condition, but my vision for it was that I was going to buy it, renovate it, which I did, put a new roof on it, basically gut it from the inside, put up new drywall, refloor it. They had a lot that I bought next to it that was essentially overgrown grass. So I cleared the lot, paved the lot, put parking spots there. So what I had was a nice size 1-story building that would be great for a small nonprofit or a small business, small law firm with parking now. Right. And I did well with that process. Okay. The renovation went great. That's amazing. I got a tenant in there.
Wow.
And then Houston started to experience raining at a level that no one had ever seen.
Oh, no.
And I'm sure you all heard about Harvey, the massive flood that hit Houston a few years back. Well, essentially, my whole building went under during that flood.
No!
All the months of work
that hurts
and
my
with
heart.
water intrusion, it's more than just the water that comes in and causes you a problem, because that will recede eventually. It's the mold. So I essentially had to rehab the building for mold, which is a state regulated process. Long story short, praise the Lord that I had good flood insurance on the property, and they paid me out a sum that made it all worth it.
Okay, good.
Because the building was a total loss at that point.
Yeah.
But at that time, I was able to just exit, because with insurance proceeds, you're not forced to do anything to the property. So I basically shopped the property around. I said, look, the thing flooded. It was a 100-year flood. It hadn't flooded before that.
Right.
Maybe it'll flood again in 100 years. But it's still a wonderful property. It needs to be rehabbed. I've done the mold restoration. I've cleaned it out to the extent I can. Someone just needs to take it and do something with it that makes sense. So these guys came along. It was zoned as an office retail. It was zoned as office. They wanted to convert it to a retail restaurant. So they bought it and very, it was ingenious of them to basically say, look, this flooding issue may be a future problem. So let's just treat that as like a storage area. So, and then they built up on the building. So the floor that flooded ended up becoming their basement. And then they built above that to create a restaurant where you just took the stairs up to the restaurant. So I'm like, perfect example of like, one person's trash is another person's treasure, right?
100%.
So it worked out for them. They got it. I mean, I had paid so little for the building to begin with that I was able to sell it for a real profit. And it was still lower than what they could ever have bought a property of that size elsewhere in the city. So it was a win-win for us all. And
I love that.
But, again, it's like commercial is a different dynamic because you're dealing with different regs. Like to gut and renovate a commercial property is like 3 times more expensive than residential because you're dealing with now commercial contractors, not residential contractors. So it was definitely quite an undertaking. I learned a ton from that process. A lot of stress and gray hairs, I'm sure, but it all worked out. And I would love to do commercial again. I think the office space, given on the heels of COVID, is not what it was. But I think there's going to be a way to be in commercial that is going to be conducive to the modern work day and the modern spirit of working.
Right.
And so if I saw an opportunity, I would definitely consider it.
Yeah. And I must admit that I have to share with the audience that you're brilliant at building connections with like builders and the people that you work with, and like if getting referrals. Like you're very resourceful. Like what are the techniques that you look for when you're looking for someone?
Yeah, so my thing with that is I'd rather pay to not have a headache, right?
I like that. Yeah.
So it's not always me trying to find the cheapest contractor.
Right.
I want to get the best contractor within reason.
That's smart.
So I am not. It's not beneath me to drive around certain parts of town where I know people have a lot more money than me.
Yes.
And take pictures of the magnets on people's trucks. I keep a little notes, entry in my phone of photos and names of companies and phone numbers so that when I need that, I know these are good because you're building $100 million home. So, and if you aren't at my price point, somebody down market who can help me.
That is
and so I kind of start at the top and try and negotiate as much as I can. And if they are like, lady, kick rocks, I'm like, okay, but who's your like favorite mid-level plumber? And they're like, oh yeah, call my buddy here. And so, and the other thing is like, there is so much to learn from contractors. Like when we first moved to LA, we bought a house and it was a new house. So we had like a period of time where we could get the contractors to come in and make little adjustments.
Oh, nice.
I made a list of all of those people. I became friends with them all. I could call any of them now and say, hey, I have a quick electrical question or a quick plumbing question. And they know I send them business. So one thing about business is don't be a taker, right?
Right.
So if people are consistently helping you, you have to find ways to help them.
Yeah.
Even if you can't directly hire them yourself, send people that you know to them or highly recommend them to others so that they reap the benefits of helping you. So that's kind of like my, approach is get to know folks who are really good at their jobs. I tell my kids every day, they're like thinking about what they want to do when they grow up. I'm like, you should think about being a master electrician, a master plumber. I'm like, these guys are doing multi-million-dollar homes all over the city and state, and they have all of these plumbers and electricians working under them. And let me just tell you, they're doing a lot better than I am. Yeah, so
because nobody wants to do these trades. That's what I heard on Good Morning America. People were like, "The trades. That's what's like you should be doing."
That is a highly employable field. Yeah, and you can make great money. Ultimately, you're a business owner who is doing very well and training people under you. But yeah, I mean, to really answer your question is just being resourceful. When we were renovating the house we're in. Our contractor, and this happens a lot, you'll get all these contractors who are like, yes, I'm going to do your job. And then they get a bid opportunity on something in Malibu with like a big, 180 view.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't really want to work on your project anymore. And so they ditch you at the last minute.
That's so frustrating.
Which is why it's good to have that list. But also, you just might have to go jump in yourself. So I jumped in and finished our project. I had to find a hot mopper, which is a process when you're doing showers and tiling and tubs. But I was driving down the 101 one day and I saw a guy in his truck and it said hot mop.
Stop.
I called that man so fast. I was like, sir, can you do a hot mop job in this part of town this week? He was like, yes, send me the address. He came over there. I asked for a few references, asked him a few, give me some addresses you worked on. Boom. He did a flawless job. But like, you got to be real estate. I'm driving down the 101. Boom. I mean, it was divine intervention because I was like, seriously? How am I going to find a hot mopper?
I've never even heard of such.
I know, exactly. I didn't even know what it was at first. I'm like, what? So, I mean, I've learned so much through this process of just having to roll my sleeves up and jump in.
Yeah. It's, with all of your success in building your home, this is amazing. I mean, obviously you have the 4 kids, so you're like, okay, the more work, the better. But do you envision yourself like retiring from the legal field ever, or you're just like, you know what, I like doing both. I like wearing both hats.
I do right now I do like wearing both hats. I mean, my secret dream would be to be a builder.
Ooh,
and so I talk to our builder, Barack, he's great all the time. And he thinks I'm joking when I'm like, Barack, I'm going to work for you one day. He's like, oh, Iman, I can't afford you. I'm like, Barack, I'm going to work for you one day. Right. But I really just would work. I would honestly work for him for free because I would just want to learn that process from like, soup to nuts. Yeah. And then I would have to go so far out of the city to probably do a project. But, I would start small, way out somewhere where the land is not so expensive and the mistakes will, won't be so egregious if I do make some. Right. But, and just try to do the process. But this is a far off goal of mine. I need to stack some more cash before I do this. But yeah, I think that, when I hit 55 or so, I think that's going to be like my focus.
That's brilliant. I could so see you too. And I'm going to hold you to it. When you turn 55, I'll be like, okay, let's go. I'll be your first intern.
You got it. You sold.
Exactly. And then are there any other industries that you're interested in or like, dabbling in? Because you're such a multi-hyphe that I'm
I have a business with my kids and their friends called Starrior, which is a educational kids brand. Okay. And we create clothing and sell toys that are education focused. We'll be taking their brand to Essence Festival this year, which we're all very excited about. Yes! But yeah, that's one of my, I have started and stopped so many businesses. Like we would have to do a whole separate podcast on all the businesses I've started and failed at and but still have learned from. Exactly. And I think it's a constant, I'm, like my husband said, I have a list of so many things, but I do think I'm getting wiser.
I love that.
About my bandwidth and like what's realistic. Because I tell you what, if I had like more money, I probably would have a whole lot of businesses just going. Yeah. Because I guess love the process. I've looked at several franchises.
You sound like my husband now. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
I love this.
If you're ever thinking about a franchise, call me first. I'll tell you some tricks, but I'm always looking at franchises. I could think that I want to do one. I just haven't found one that I want to do.
I really want to do an In-N-Out so badly. I wish they would just let us in. Come on.
I know.
I'm like, I'm there.
Or Chick-fil-A. I went through that. I was like, they were like, you need to work in our Chick-fil-A, ma'am. I'm like, but I have another job.
Right.
They're like, that's sort of a prerequisite. You have to actually have worked in our Chick-fil-A. I was like, great, I'll cross that one off.
Right. Boo. But okay, I mean, you've made it through all of the questions, but there is a lightning round.
Oh gosh.
I know. So this is where we ask our guests to respond in 1 to 5 words, and it's just 5 questions. So hopefully it'll be fun. Okay. My passion in real estate comes from
people who have made a lot more money than me in the real estate sector.
I love that. And then it means having it all to me when
I can dabble in all of the things that I want to dabble in.
I love it. Spoken like a true lawyer and real estate powerhouse. A fun fact about me that you may not know.
Oh, gosh. I've been to 6 continents, and my last one is Antarctica, and I'm having trouble finding anyone that wants to go there.
I'm like, Black people are in Antarctica?
Come on, folks. Don't you want to be cold?
Right? Nope. Oh, my gosh. That's impressive. And then doing more blank. Do more blank. So what do you want to do more?
Oh gosh, I want to do more investing. I mean, even in the startup space, I do a little bit of investing in that, but I want to do more. But that's it's a bigger hit or miss space to be in because most don't do as well. So it's trying to find the right one.
Right. It's like any type of investment. It's just like, it seems like be in it for the long haul. Get in, like you said. Like these are the things I'm taking from you personally.
Yes.
And then last question, this podcast, how was your experience?
I loved it. You are a queen.
Yay,
you also multi-hyphenate and brilliant.
Thanks.
So I'm just honored to be in your company and
oh my gosh,
shocked and aghast that you would want me to be on your podcast.
I mean, you were dropping so many jewels. I'm not going to be surprised if people are reaching out to you directly and I'm like, guys, you can't do that. Or limit how much.
Yes, limit.
And is there any like contact information you want to share, whether it's your IG, your website, whatever the case
Yes,
may be?
my IG is just at Iman Farrior. I'm not incognito at all. But yeah, feel free to hit me up. I'm happy to answer what I can. And if I can't answer it, I'll send you to someone who can.
Yeah. And I just love because like she's inspiring me how to be a very involved parent. I'm like, her kids are so active. I'm like, this is amazing. And you're active. You like the golf, the tennis. I'm just like, hats off to you.
I'm a busybody. I'm like, and I think it's an addictive thing. So I'm trying to create that addiction with my kids. It's just to stay active.
That's so brilliant. Because that's what they need for like a healthy lifestyle.
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
Oh, well, this has been such a treat.
I loved it. Thank you.
So much,
Thank you, everybody.
And toodles, guys. Check out our next week when we'll have another multi-hyphenate, just as amazing as Iman, but may not have all the jewels and tips. So stay tuned. Toodles.